Hey guys and girls, just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about Buzzsprout. Start a podcast today with free podcast hosting for Buzzsprout, easy podcasting software for hosting, promoting, and tracking your podcast. Buzzsprout is the best way to publish a podcast online for secure and reliable hosting to full iTunes support. Get started for free, no credit card required, cancel at any time.
Stats are for losers. That's why we took the damn field. Now, if you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
This is what's great about sports. This is what the greatest thing about sports is.
You play to win the game.
Welcome to the Airin podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Airing It Out podcast. It's your host, Dustin Marion. As always, today my guest is Jonathan Gates, a consultant for podcasting and for radio. What is going on, brother? How you doing?
Not much, man. I'll tell you, I'm enjoying the laid-back kind of retired lifestyle now that I don't really do much other than, consult and answer people's questions and help them take the first steps. And I believe that's what I did with you, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I want to thank you so much for that. It was a lot to take in.
Hey, man. I'm just glad to see you actually doing it and working it and not quitting, because that's the key to anything, especially with podcasting, because there's I think it was like you said, the last thing I said to you was there's no money in podcasting. There's almost not even any joy except for what you get out of the work. You have to truly love what you're doing to be a podcaster.
You know what's the cool thing? Even though I don't get paid as I'm doing this now, it's really great to hear other people's stories and struggles and situations and how they've overcome adversity. And you can pull a lot. I keep trying to understand, and it's about the journey, but without dollar bills, the journey's rough. But
yeah. It's like, it's all about the journey.
Right?
It's all
I'm
about
like,
the
shut
journey.
up.
My car's falling apart. I need new tires. My kid's about to die.
Oh my God, for real. But at least with that, you have fun, you meet new people. I think, what's a really cool thing also about the podcasting, since we can't hang out with people anymore due to COVID and some of the lockdowns, that it's a really great way to network too,
Well, if you notice, just about everybody is technically podcasting now, even the news. Even well before COVID hit, the major media companies and organizations were already picking up on how podcast was becoming a very slow-moving pop culture movement. But by the time that I started, only not even 50% of Americans, of adult people, had even listened to a podcast. Now, I think that number is well over 80-90% for adults, and I don't mean like millennials, because all of them, that's all they do now, and the younger generation. But people like my age, in their 30s and 40s, we grew up in the internet age, but podcasting was like a relatively new idea, something we didn't understand. But now the media companies picked up on it, and then when COVID hit, they already had the infrastructure in place where they just sent their people home with headphones and a microphone and a computer, and they just logged in and started talking back and forth. And that's why you get such a professional looking quality audio and video format from them for their daily news cycles, even though it's at your home.
That's insane. So before we get into the juicy part, you have a radio background. When did you make the switch from the radio to the podcasting, or was it a simultaneous movement and you just realized like it was another tool?
Well, I'll tell you, and you want to talk about airing it out. Here's airing it out.
Let's go.
So the podcast that I started was with a good friend of mine, Tyler Johnson. And when we started the podcast, big shout out to Tyler. He's the co-host of the Dusty Futon.
Nice.
And when we started the podcast, it was because he had spent 3 years working in the production or working in the promotion side of iHeartMedia, formerly Clear Channel, trying to get a break. And this dude's got the voice. He's got the intelligence. He could pull it off with some training and a good co-host. Obviously, he can nail it. And he did when we came together. But I got jumped in on radio strictly because of opportunity. Like, I had timing, skill, and the opportunity was there. But instead of going to somebody at their promotion team who had been trying for years, they pick up a brand new guy fresh out of college. And it's like, the industry itself has gotten so bureaucratic on its own that it's ignoring talent in favor of dollar signs. And so I saw that problem, and I'm like, there's a lot of people who need to get out there for one. So I decided me and Tyler could start a podcast. And at the same time, being as a morning show producer for a morning radio show in San Diego, I got to talk with a lot of artists as they come through, and a lot of other people as they go to the different radio stations. And I even got to talk to their handlers, the people that push them through and run through. And my biggest problem with the way they did interviews is how the hosts of the shows usually drove everything, and the guests never really got to talk about what they wanted to. They had to talk about what the radio station approved. They had to talk about what their producers or their promoting staff approved. They have to talk about whatever, only the reason they're there for. Like if they're a comedian doing a show, that's all they really can talk about other than telling funny stories. So they're extremely limited. And when you add in the sponsors, these paid advertisers and these paid sponsors, radio is now completely at their beck and call, to where there literally is no entertainment in the radio anymore other than the fluff that you see. Behind the scenes, it's BS. It's all crap. And so I started a podcast to try to, give those voices out there, to give people a voice who normally wouldn't have one. And when you go to do that, just in that alone, that's almost like volunteer work. You're not going to get any money if you're trying to give people a voice who don't have one.
That's insane. Being that podcasting is probably the complete opposite of the story that you just told us, and with the growth of it, like you were talking about it, and with Rogan getting the 50,000, now iHeartRadio has a podcasting, situation they're trying to get into. I feel that podcasting is still private or pirated radio, kind of, right? Because there's nobody really governing the space.
Yeah.
Do you feel that eventually, because of all these big guys moving in, eventually there'll be some kind of governing force to try to kind of slow down?
I don't think there'll be a governing force because it's not like radio. It's not public access. It is a subscription service because you subscribe to the podcasting, but you have to pay internet to get to it. You have to do this. Like Facebook hasn't really been regulated too much. A lot of these other companies, these internet companies, are not being overly regulated. So the governing body concept is not too concerning. And most of the issues about podcasting are covered under copyright issues. And that's already laid the groundwork for that. So in terms of controlling it, I don't think that's possible with the freedom that we have with the internet. The only concern I would have is all the major platforms that do support the podcast and promote them being bought basically, and money being thrown at them to push this company's podcast higher. I want this podcast to be promoted, so here's $100,000 to make sure it gets up there in the number one charts. Like that's the stuff that happens with music, and that's kind of the stuff that is already happening with podcasts. Because you have to know marketing. If you're good at marketing, you can get your podcast, even if it only has 3 or 4 episodes, you can get it shot up to the number one on Apple if you do your marketing right. But that's all a game, and that takes away from what you want to do with the podcast, which is spend the time on putting it out there and getting the information out there rather than spending 2 or 3 more hours per episode just trying to figure out the right marketing campaign to get it going. It's pain.
As kind of an entrepreneurial avenue, do you think that some of it is kind of wasted because, again, you're running such a tight budget, you probably don't have help for the editing and all this other stuff, now you got to come into the marketing? I think you had mentioned to me when you gave me the advice, make sure that you love it or that you enjoy doing it. Is it more of a passion project than a real business scaling kind of idea?
It's very difficult to scale a podcast until you've already started having some sort of income with it. When you have, just in economics alone, if you don't have a bottom line, or if you don't have an income, then you can't scale from that. You don't have any data to scale up from. So you have to create a business model, which is what I did with my podcast. I actually sat down and created a business model that had a path towards potentially making money. You know, you got to go into it knowing, like, for podcasting, for the first 2, 3, possibly 5 years, you may not even make a penny until you get enough listeners to be part of those the services that give you advertisers, right? That they give you a portion of the advertisers' money so that you can make a little bit of money in advertising. But scaling it up to actually make money from that is, again, difficult because you're relying on so many unknowns. Like, right now with podcasting, the data that we get in terms of how our podcasts are downloaded, how they're read, how they're listened to, it is so light. It's missing so much metadata that you can get from anything else that it's so difficult to properly scale it up. You have to have a really big marketing push and a word of mouth campaign in order to really move the business up. But in terms, like, I don't have specific numbers on this, but I would say that probably less than 10% of podcasts out there make enough money to support every aspect of the podcasting, like paying for someone to edit, paying for someone to do the recording, the audio recording, paying what, even if you're doing all of it, you still wear those hats, you still have to pay yourself. I don't think many podcasts at all can technically even afford that. They have your main guy like you working for free, literally working for free just so the podcast could possibly make money. So you're not ever going to make money until the podcast makes more than you're working for, right? So you have to get to that break-even point before you can even consider figuring out how to scale it up, because otherwise you're only scaling up your debt.
That makes total sense. Yeah, no, trust me. We'll get into it too. I've spent a lot of money on equipment already, bro.
Oh yeah.
What I wanted to say, we talked a little bit off
nice
air.
Mic, by the way.
Thank you so much. Shout out to Sterling for putting this mic together. It was a pretty sick deal. I ended up buying so many different mics, and it was crazy. But this one, for right now, works. I'm looking at I really like the Rode pod mic. That one looks pretty sharp. Mm-hmm. And then obviously Shure just came out with a new model. But again, no one has freaking $400 to drop on one mic, and then you have two guests. That's $800. Forget about bringing somebody else in, and then, you need some kind of
plus your $400 headphones,
right? So this would be a shout out if they would ever listen to this. But I feel like because of the growth of this and maybe some of this stuff staying on shelves, even though there was a mad rush for mics, like I don't know if you checked, but during COVID, any kind of audio recording gear sold out. Not available. Oh, yeah. But I feel like they should bundle more of it, right? Like I know Audio Technica had a bundle with a mic and a headset and a stand, $170. That's still a lot, but at least you get multiple things, right? Like this one was $100, but it was no boom arm. It was just the mic and the shock mount. But I want to reel it back before we start getting into more of that technical stuff. Do you believe with sites like Patreon and Buy Me a Cup of Coffee, maybe that might help cut some of the learning curve in the sense of how you are managing, maybe getting in dollars to try to help grow the podcast?
Yeah, and the reason why it can is because it creates a steady income, and that's the biggest hardest thing for any business to really get to is having a steady monthly income. Because once you have that, then you can properly budget. When you can budget and you have a steady, stream of income, then from there you can develop a profit plan, a plan to actually make profit. And from there, then you can scale that up and work on getting more Patreon supporters and more subscribers to your podcast. And once you get that rolling, it's like a ball rolling downhill. It just keeps picking up steam. And unless you do something to screw it up, it usually hits a point where it'll just stagnate and stay there for a while until you change it up. And then from there, you can just develop your profit earning.
Yeah, no, it's weird because you think you're just supposed to press record and get it, but there's so many facets of this business.
That's the other thing, man. People don't understand what goes into editing. That's that is the get. Like that is seriously the rub for any type of entertainment online, any type of like video, audio, pre-recorded, whatnot. And I think like video is tough, but there's audio is tougher because you only have one sense paying attention. Only your ears are paying attention. So that's what you're focused on. Unless you're distracted or whatnot, you're going to hear everything. So you have to put out a good product if you want to keep people coming back, because they're going to hear everything. They're not watching it and hearing it and kind of whatever. They're just listening. So there's a little bit more pressure on getting the audio part right. And in that, while I was doing the podcast, I also started doing some video editing, and I had developed the utmost respect for any YouTuber who puts out a video once a week, no matter how crappy the video is.
I
if
agree.
It's just shot from their phone, I just like, really, dude, you just sat up there and I'm sure you spent 10 hours editing that 20-minute video. Like, seriously, bro.
It's crazy. Like, I totally agree with you. It's one thing to try to understand how difficult the audio engineering side of it is, but you find true limitations when you're trying to edit video, because some of these files are so big and maybe your computer is not powerful enough to even scrub through a sequence so that you could see if it's any fucking good. You got to export it, take a look at it, and then go back to the drawing board, back and forth. It's crazy.
Export it, it takes 3 days. Unless you have the newest iMac Pro, it takes 3 days to export. Then you go back and you're like, wait, what was I looking for again?
Right. Unbelievable. So now I want to start to hit up some of these things. So usually, I think when we talked, it was trying to, and I think this is a good message for a lot of people, trying to find how to do it with the least amount of money spent, right?
Yes,
because if
that was the first thing you wanted, yeah. And honestly, and this is what people who, if you really want to start a podcast, if you really want to start anything, it doesn't matter how much money you spend to get started. Like if you're a musician, right, and you're picking up the guitar, you don't go out and buy a Martin for your first guitar, so you're not going to go out and buy the best freaking, set of Bose headphones and Audio Technica recording equipment and all that other stuff. You're not going to go top of the line. My recommendation is go to a pawn shop, see what they got behind the counter. If they got a little mixer, grab it. If they got a microphone, headphones, grab it. If it's cheap, cool, go for it. You don't need new equipment to get started. You just need equipment to get started, and then you save money as you go through the process, and then you increase, you get better, you get higher quality gear, you constantly change out. And as you probably already know, it becomes an addiction.
I can't believe it. I didn't think it was going to be an addiction, bro. I stay up late nights scrolling through fucking websites, trying to figure out what's the newest, hottest, trendiest noise reduction, all this other nonsense to try to get a good mic. My biggest headache.
Watching YouTube reviews,
oh my God,
reading
unboxings,
all those different,
reading the comments to see if the guy is actually saying what he's supposed to be saying. It's become from a hobby to a passion, and I'm cool with it because obviously with COVID, there's time. But I think one of my biggest hangups when we were talking was the mic thing, and I think a lot of people don't really understand. Like you said, you can start a little bit of the entry level and kind of work your way up. I got lucky because in our conversation I got with a gentleman, and he kind of had a basic kind of setup, and I basically just ran with his. So, for people listening, I thought that the Audio Technica AT2100s were great. Not only did they have an XLR attachment, or that you can put use it with XLR, but you could also use it with USB, and it had its own headphone jack. So it was kind of all in it, and used, which is what I did. Got it used for $60, and it worked great. But there was also a limitation. And then I went and I got Focusrite Scarlett i2 2i2, and that was kind of the basic thing. But then again,
that was my first one too. Yeah.
I needed to get a computer to freaking edit the stuff, right? So that now I had to go look at refurbished computers, 2, 3, 4, 500. Then we need software, and so it just kept on going.
But hey, at least with the software, and I'll tell you, this is the biggest break for anybody who wants to start on podcasting. There are so many free software out there that because all you're doing is voice recording. You don't need to add a bunch of fancy audio effects. You don't need to add a bunch of different tools and tweaks and stuff like that. You don't even need to remove background noise or echoes or any of that. Most people don't care. All you need is recording it and then cutting out the crap.
So with
and
that, is
Audacity.
There you go. So Audacity is your number one?
It's number one for PC, but that's only because of what I know.
Right.
It's hard to do multi-track record. You can't do multi-track recording on Audacity, so you end up with only one recording.
By the way, how much I learned that the hard way. What a pain in the ass! If there's a tick in the same track, I can't take it out.
Yep. Nope.
That's like fuck. Now I got to do multi-track.
Multi-track, yeah. Multi-track recording is if you want to be able to edit properly and edit in a good way for flow, for content, and for sound, you have to do multi-track recording. Otherwise, it's pretty much just record, edit the end, maybe cut out some crap in the middle, and post. But beyond that, once you get the multi-track recording, you start having fun because then you start being able to tweak and really understand how to affect people's pausing. Like, and I remarked to you when I listened to a couple of your episodes, your editing skills are getting up there top notch, bro. Like
Thanks,
you're
bro. I appreciate
really
you
quality.
so much, man. That's so much love.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, man. Because like one of the hardest things is the natural breathing, the natural breaths that people take. Like even though like right now I'm talking with you, I'm probably talking a little bit faster than you would like for your final episode. So there might be a couple breaks where you'll pause me a little bit to give me that extra space. And that's important for two reasons. It keeps people interested because of the natural rhythm, and it also keeps them kind of on their edge for that extra pause. Like when you leave that extra pause, it keeps them going with the story. So it has a lot of good psychological effect on listening when you can get those editing skills up to par. And man, you got it. You're doing great, bro.
Thank you, bro. Listen, I didn't even realize that we had plosives and fucking hiss and fucking yesing. And I'm like, oh my God. And now I got to worry about breaths. I was like, this shit.
Yeah.
I tell you, getting back to what you were saying earlier, you definitely, sticking with it is great, but there's so many times that you just want to be like, this is just way too much. And you throw your hands in the air, whether it's your system crashing, whether it's, you know, your DAWs taking a crap, you know, the mic's not working properly, the interference. I mean, you hear it in your headphones, but then when you go back, there's stuff there. I mean, it is. Yeah. I got to say, I'm happy that I came from the restaurant industry, which pretty much it's a problem solving industry. It's not so much serving food. So with all of that, I kind of had that built in where troubleshooting and problem solving is something that I'm already used to, especially on the fly, because there's nothing worse than right. You got a great audio, or you think you do, and you go back and it's done.
I'll tell you, man, the way I ran my podcast is we would usually set up anywhere from 3 to 4, maybe even 5 recording sessions back to back, and each recording session was an hour long. And they were back to back. So it's like 4 or 5 hours of straight recording. And there were so many times where I had to, on the fly, troubleshoot my computer not connecting to my interface, one microphone not working, and I had like 8 microphone cables and headphone cables spread out. So you can't pause. You cannot freak out. You have to just go into, okay, this step, step by step, troubleshoot until you fix the problem. And I had one time, I have a new, my device is an Apogee Ensemble Thunderbolt 2, and it has 8 microphone inputs on the back and up to 32 total inputs through connection. It's a really awesome
that sounds
interface.
Pretty badass.
It is. It's like, I think it was $2,800.
Fuck.
So it's
it's a commitment.
It's quality. Yeah, it is. It is. And, and I didn't make that money back. I'll tell you that. But,
I'm learning that quickly. I don't think you ever do.
No, that's why it has to be a passion. You have to basically consider it like you're collecting these items. Like it's a collection, you know. But when I first got that new equipment and a brand new MacBook Pro, I had all that brand new equipment, and I went to do a 4-hour recording session, and when I got everything set up and got it working, 15 minutes before the first band showed up, nothing worked.
Wow.
and I had just gotten everything set up and had it tested, had it working. Stepped away from it. It came back. Nothing worked. And it was a stupid little switch that somehow got set inside the software. And in 15 minutes, I was able to troubleshoot it, not having any clue about how to use that Apogee Ensemble. Really, I had to do quick YouTube research. I had to read through a manual in like 5 seconds. Like, it's a lot of work. And like you said, you come from the restaurant industry, and there is a lot of troubleshooting in that. People don't realize, like, you have all those different connections from the back, all the way from the back of the restaurant, all the way to the table. And you have to figure out how to make all that work. And if you don't do that, you're going to get fired.
Yep. So at least I'm glad that I had at least that part, because man, you literally, the beads of sweat just start showing up, and it always happens right before you're ready to rock and roll, bro.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like
I had to sit with that stress for 4 recording sessions.
Oh my
and
God.
It's like I never got to calm down because you shoving them all in and out, in and out, in and out. Oh.
I know, it's crazy. So
not to mention.
Go ahead. No, please, and not to mention.
Not to mention, you still have to research your guests.
Yeah. Right.
And know that, and have those questions ready.
Yeah, no shit, dude. It's like I said, it's multifaceted. Like I said, it's not just press freaking record, and you're so it could become overwhelming. There's just so many little parts, because anything. Yeah. I was just gonna say it should be called Murphy's Law, not podcasting, because anything that's bound to happen will happen, and at that specific moment.
Well, that's why not everybody does it.
Right.
Anything that's worth doing is difficult to do, and if you want it, you'll get it done.
Facts.
And when we talked, you wanted it. Like, I tried to talk you out of it, because and not because you didn't have the passion, because you had the passion, but I tried to talk you out of it because I wasn't sure. I didn't know you really very well,
right? And
so I wasn't sure if you actually had that strong of a will to push through all this crap, because it is, the first year is just like you're getting beat up by every which way, and you're just like, I'm just trying to do this, I'm just trying to get my message out, and everyone's like, no, and everything's trying to tell you no, walk away. You have to really push, and you did. That's
Thanks,
how
bro.
you make it.
Yeah, it was tough, bro, from trying to get my DAWs to understand Audition and trying to sync that up, and then now I got to go into my sound interface within the computer to change the kilowatts so they fucking match. And I'm just like, oh my God, bro. I'm like, why is this thing? Why is the megahertz in this? And again, to come from a background that's not of sound and audio, no. I mean, golly, I can't tell you how many YouTube hours you put in and research hours you put in to try to figure it out. And it sucks because if you don't word it right within YouTube, you'll be stuck looking at videos that have nothing to do with what you're looking for.
Yep. And honestly, that was my biggest, the part of the reason why I went, let me try that again. With the podcasting, like, even though I had a little bit of the skill and knowledge of audio editing, there's still those things that you don't know. And if you don't even know how to ask the question, you'll never learn. Because like you said, you have to use the search tool properly. And if you don't know what word to look for, you're watching a video trying to understand something. And by the end of the video, 30 minutes wasted, you've learned nothing that you needed. And you're just more frustrated and worse off than where you were when you started.
No, I couldn't agree more. This is definitely not for the faint of heart, you guys. This shit is hard.
But okay, we're talking down on it so much. But the
there
thing
are
about
rewards.
it is,
there are rewards.
We started off, the biggest reward for me is how many people I made a connection with.
I agree. Yes.
That understanding and the willingness to sit down and listen to somebody and hear what they want to say and give them that freedom to just talk is the biggest reward I never even knew I was going to get out of podcasting. Like, I spent the better part of 5 years talking to well over 100 different artists, musicians, and learning, not just talking to them, but learning from them how they go through life as an artist, how they go through life doing this. So you gain a wealth of extra knowledge by putting yourself through the pains of podcasting, because you get to hear other people's perspectives that you may normally not have heard. And you get to edit it so you hear it like a million freaking times.
It's almost like drilled into your brain on a subconscious level, because you're running it back over and over and over again. I mean, I prepare for these guys and talk and go through them, and even I forget. And when I re-listen to it, I can't tell you how many times I'm just like floored. I'm like, wow, this is gold. This guy just said something that it's been chugging me along. It really has, especially in those moments where you're kind of just like, man, this is kind of difficult. I wanted to ask you, because you said you got the Mac Pro Air when you made that investment.
The MacBook Pro.
Yeah, sorry. The Apples, they got so many different versions. Yeah.
I know.
Do you think that for people with Macs that are able to afford them, is GarageBand a good tool to use as a DAWs?
GarageBand, I will say 100%, and the only reason is because if you already have a Mac, it's free.
Right. That makes total sense.
GarageBand is 100% free. It is a thinned down version of what is their software? Apple's other Pro Tools? Yeah.
Yes, Pro Tools.
No, not Pro Tools. What's Apple's other one?
Logic.
Because Pro Tools is the big Logic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Logic and GarageBand are literally the same product. The difference is the user interface. GarageBand's user interface is more friendly, more for the average to not common user, and Logic is for the more professional or the more above amateur users. And you get that basically for free with a Mac. So even if you go and pick up an old 2008, 2010, 2012, MacBook, whether it's a MacBook or whether it's an iMac, it's going to have GarageBand for free, and you can use it to create podcasts. It doesn't have to be the latest version. It can be any version. You just need to have an interface or a microphone that hooks up to that computer that it understands, and you're good. You're set to go. Plus, the editing tools that are in there, or not the other added features that are in there for audio effects and things you can do for leveling and crossing is pretty damn good for free.
Switching from the Mac to the PC, what are your thoughts on Appleton and Appleton Lite? Because I know that's another free platform. Have you ever had an opportunity to experiment with Appleton?
Actually, Appleton is really, really good. The only problem I have with it is if you're going from something like with a better user interface like GarageBand to Ableton, it is really difficult to grasp it unless you know all the technical details. But if you're just starting out, start out on something like Ableton, because it's free, it's a good program, and you will learn all the technical details as you push through it, so that when you do upgrade to Pro Tools, or when you do get to Logic or any of those other more professional DAWs, you're going to be ready to go and just jump right into it and have a very, very short learning curve.
So we talked about a free version, a complimentary version with the Mac, kind of went a little bit in the middle. What are your thoughts on Audition?
Honestly, I've never dealt with that. It's part of the Adobe suite, so that usually comes with, for most people who have Audition, I think, are either professionals in the radio industry, because it's like a package that's bought with all the Adobe package, or they're video editors who happen to have Audition. So I really don't know anything about it. It is definitely a high-level tool. I know that.
Okay, so let's go. So we go. I think a lot of people, we got to nail it down or hammer it in a little bit more. It's okay to buy used goods, used gear, kind of get yourself familiar with it, using free software.
I would say it's beyond okay. I would recommend
that
you start with used gear, because if you go into this and you buy all the brand new gear and you're not cut out for all that editing, you've wasted a ton of money. And even if you try to resell it, you're not getting your money back. I'd be better off buying something that's used, that barely works, so that you can get a feel for it and get a taste for it and go through those trial errors and frustration. Like, it's almost necessary to start cheap so that you can learn if you care or not.
And then, so I think that's amazing advice. So when we're talking about the used gear thing, obviously we figured out where we should kind of land with the DAWs. For interfaces, Do you have a particular brand that you enjoy? Because like I said, the Focusrite was my guy, and they did right by it. It's great, but I know, is it Prosonus or Prosonus? I always get it wrong, but there's a bunch of other guys in the building. What are your thoughts on digital interfaces?
If all you're doing is voice recording, it's not a huge difference. The preamps are different in every different interface, and that's like the key when it comes to any type of audio interface, whether it's a mixing board or whether it's a digital audio interface or whatever the case is with an XLR plug. Those preamps that you plug the XLR cable into, they vary a little bit, but for the average listener and the average speaker, it's not a big difference. So I always started with the Focusrite. I think it's a Scarlett 2 in 2 out or something like that.
That's correct. Yep.
You can buy, they're everywhere. You can buy them on eBay for like $40 or something. And right off the bat, you've got 2 multi-track recording capability. So you can have 2 guests that you can independently edit, or 2 voices that you can independently edit right away. And other than that, like, just progress and only focus on how many microphones you need. If it's only going to be you and one other person, go for a 2 in 2 out. Get the Focusrite Scarlett, because you only need the 2, and those are good preamps and they're cheap and it works great. If you find yourself hoping that you might end up with a crew of 4 people on every episode, look for one that has 4 inputs. And I found this badass one. It's by Akai, A-K-A-I.
They make good shit. I like the little Beats board. I want one of those.
Yeah, I got one of those. I got a tiny little one.
Yeah, they badass company.
Oh yeah, they make fun stuff. This is called the EIEIO.
Okay, sounds like the farm song.
Yeah,
EIEIO.
EIEIO, and I swear to God they named it for that, because the EIE part is just like BS. It's like electro music interface, whatever, and it's just EIE, and it's an input-output device. So it's EIEIO, and it's 4 channels in, and it has, I don't know if you like analog stuff like me, it has 2 analog DU meters where you can select the different inputs or outputs. There's a ton of different options on there for crossing, for headphones and all this other stuff. And when you get, like, if you're going mostly through that, you know how your some of your interfaces may only have one headphone now, right?
Right, yes.
For like $20, you can buy an amplified headphone splitter.
Nice.
That is about the size of a credit card and an inch thick.
Wow.
And it has 1 in, 4 out, and individual controls. Behringer makes it. I think theirs is like $30, but you can find a knockoff on eBay or Amazon for like 20. And it just gives you 4 individual headphone levels that you can control externally, not internally, like externally.
Damn, that's
for
dope.
Multiple guests. Yeah.
So now that we're talking about the headphones thing, because I started crazy, right? So like I'm a wild boy. I usually run before I crawl or walk.
Yep.
So I'm going in there hard, right, in the paint. And I didn't realize this, and if you could talk a little bit about it too, not only monitoring yourself while you're recording, because I was recording and I wasn't even listening to anything, and then I would get back and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
How important is it for you to monitor your own audio as well as having your guests listen to themselves as well? Because I think when they listen, they have an understanding of distance to speech, that you don't have to work on the levels, and they kind of, I think it kind of works a little better. Tell me about your experience with, because you talked about the splitter. How important is it for you not to only listen, but for your guests to kind of hear what's happening too?
It is incredibly important to listen to what you're doing. And I would even say do a bunch of test runs with you and a buddy before you ever put out an episode, so that you can understand what your levels are, and what first of all, your voice and your control over the microphone. And because that's the most important. You're the host. You're carrying the show. So if you're in the microphone and it's going back and forth like this, and you sound fine to yourself, but even in your headphones, you sound fine. But everybody else is listening. You go back and listen. You can't edit that. You cannot fix that in post.
No.
So you have to know your levels and your proper recording levels before you ever put an episode out. Beyond that, once you start recording with guests, you need to understand microphone safety for your distance for your guests, and don't be afraid to suggest to them randomly throughout the episode, hey, you want to step back a little bit, or can you get closer to the mic, or whatever. And what I did, because I didn't want to interrupt the flow at any capacity, I would literally ride the levels of their input. While we're talking, I would adjust it a little bit here and there and check it, and then I would also be looking at the WAV file as it's being created.
Yes, sir.
As it's being created, look for the peaks and valleys. And when you said about how the guest listening and hearing themselves, that my experience is more important for them to hear themselves if they're wearing headphones. If they're not wearing headphones, you don't want them to hear themselves. You don't want like a studio monitor or anything like that. So if you're running headphones, yes, and make sure that their level that they're hearing is close enough to your level so that you can monitor it properly. Or just learn to sight read a waveform.
I know, trust me, bro. I had to learn that shit too. Fucking negative dB. I'm like, what is happening here? If I could write down all the things that I've learned in the last 9 months, I'd probably shoot myself in the face if I handed it to my earlier self. Because I remember when you were telling me some of the stuff, and I'm like, fucking XLR, what the fuck is this? And then you're like, this mic and that mic, and I'm writing stuff down, and I have no idea what I'm writing. But 9 months later, I can actually have a fucking conversation about it.
Yep. Now you're practically an expert. You can start consulting on people starting up. And it's just knowing your craft is how you can better it and show and walk people through the steps to take to get to your level. And you also, honestly, you have to be willing to do that. There's too many people in this world right now who, once they get qualities in a spot, they don't want anybody else to reach them. They want to push them down instead of build them up. And it's like podcasting in itself is almost counterculture in the fact that it's all about building people up and giving a voice to the little guy, because that's what podcasting is, except for Joe Rogan.
Right.
But whatever. He's an exception to every rule right now.
100%. 100%. And I'm actually super happy, and I want to give a shout out to everybody in the podcasting community. They have been more than friendly, letting me, like they say, look behind the curtain, express information. I mean, it's almost similar. I don't know if you've ever been around the beer community, but the local craft beer guys, they're the same way. If you want to learn how to brew beer,
small breweries,
they'll show you fucking everything.
Hey, come on, let me show you a tour of my garage right now. I've got this working here, this working. This is how I set this up, and these are the hops and the barley and this type of blah 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 blah. And they're saying all you have no idea what they're saying, but they are so amped to talk about it.
Yes, and so I'm happy for at least these communities that they go in and are helpful. And like I said, for you, I appreciate all the stuff that you were able to give me in that little excerpt. I wanted to ask you another question, because this is something that I kind of found out just by accident as well. If you're doing a home podcast, right, would you recommend a condenser mic or would you recommend a dynamic?
Depends on how you're set up.
Okay, go ahead.
If you're recording your voice only in a room and you have a relatively sound controlled room, like you don't have a lot of exterior noise,
light,
kids running around in the background, trucks driving by your window, then a condenser mic, or
the dynamic, I think. The
dynamic. I was thinking, dynamic. Yeah. The dynamic mics are better, like the one you're using right there. Because I haven't.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. The condenser mic. That's why we got to get you back, bro. I'm gonna get you I'm gonna get you in shape. We're gonna start doing this again, buddy. We're gonna resuscitate it.
I know, right? But the condenser mics are better because of the richer volume, the richer level of quality.
Right. I realize that. Yeah.
And the other, the condenser mics are more like for vocals, for singing. So they're usually more for louder, good projected voice. And if you're not really allowed projection, they have to be like right on the mic to get a good level. With those mics, you can adjust them. They're more sensitive. You can adjust them to pick up more in the room. A lot of podcasters start out with like one condenser that'll pick up everybody in the area, and they have these podcast mics that'll sit on a table.
Wow, that's
and
dope.
It's almost like a speakerphone mic. Yeah. And so you just set it down on a table, plug it into your computer, and you have a few people sit around, but you don't get multi-track recording from that.
Right.
But because it is a condenser mic, it's sensitive enough to pick up everybody's different voice and pick it up well. You don't do that with a condenser mic. I mean, you don't do that with a condenser mic. Yeah,
Yeah, I got you though, bro. Don't worry about it. We're here together. We're
Hey, we've
working
been
it.
talking for like an hour, so
It's okay. Don't worry about it. We're getting tongue tied. I gotta get you. Like I said, I gotta get you back in the building. We gotta have you more on the show. That way we get you all exercising and the juicing. But yeah, no. And then, how would you recommend a dynamic for someone if there is a lot of sound and there's not a controlled sound environment? Maybe a dynamic might be in their range for them.
Yeah, and you can pick up dynamic mics for super cheap too. If you really want to go quality, you can get this basic Shure, the SM58s. Like that is the iconic condenser or dynamic microphone that is used for stage recording and stage performing all in the industry. And it's a good solid mic. And if you buy it, it holds its value and it's like a tank. So those things, like I have SM58s that I've had for well over a decade that still sound like the ones I bought brand new when I start later in the podcast. And they're really good mics, but you can pick up knockoffs. Like it was, I think the company was Samson, SAMSLN. They sold a 3-pack of dynamic mics that looked like the 58s for only $60.
Wow. That's a
They're
steal.
crap mics. They're not quality, but they're microphones that you can use in a louder environment and just turn the gain down and make sure your guests are really, really up on the microphone, and you can get decent audio for $60 for 3 microphones. Like,
no, tell me
they're XLR microphones. They're good.
Sounds like a deal, dude. Because I think with 2, I was already down 120, and looking back at it now, I think I'm about almost 4K into this investment. So depending on what it is, like I said, I want to encourage people to do it, but there's definitely many pitfalls and challenges in pursuing this journey of vocals.
That's why you start simple. You start cheap. You start with the bare minimum to go so that you can find out if you like it. And if you like it, then it might be worth the investment. You don't need to invest the money right off the bat. You just need to invest the time and the energy. And if you have the money to pick up the cheaper parts, then there you go. If you have the money to pick up the better parts as you go along, then there you go. But starting cheap, you less skin in the game, so it's easier to walk away if you don't like it. So that way you're not forcing yourself to try to make money off of this thing that you don't like. It's so easy to get burned out. I got burned out, and I got burned out after about 5 years, and that's part of the reason I kind of walked away from podcasting for a little bit. But I'm feeling the itch. I'm feeling it. I've been feeling it lately.
Don't worry, bro. I'm here to help you scratch it because, even though you said you were trying to kind of shift me away from a different point of view, you were more than helpful, and you definitely laid some kind of a blueprint for me. I want to get you back on the show and help people understand. I want to help you grow whatever it is you want to do.
Anytime, man.
For people that are listening, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, any of those things, any handles that anybody could follow you?
Well, you can find, I don't even do, I'm so old,
Don't
man.
worry about it,
I'm
bro.
like even getting my Facebook account, my main Facebook account was hacked.
Wow.
Like a month ago. And I don't mean like hacked as in I left it open and somebody changed my password. I mean, these people drove into my account. They changed one of my trusted friends, so I couldn't unlock it. They changed my password. They changed everything. And I had my podcast connected to that.
Shit.
And also my Facebook advertising account. They tried to start charging money on me. It was bad.
Damn, that's terrible.
Facebook doesn't do anything to help.
No,
not
I know.
a damn thing.
That's kind of why
I
steered away from Facebook a little bit because of that stuff. But any social media for people to reach out and check you out?
Well, I'm on the Facebook at Jonathan Gates. You can find me, search Jonathan Gates. There might be a picture of my dog there. I think.
Got you. And then
I think it's a dog with sunglasses.
and the podcast. The podcast. Oh, and you said you are on. Tell me again.
Yeah, I was going to say we have YouTube for the podcast. Just search Dusty Futon on YouTube.
Dusty Futon. Yes,
and
sir.
Dusty Futon. And if you like local independent music from the Southern California area, that is the podcast to listen to. We talk to over 100 different artists of different genres, different qualities, different styles, different ages, just about how they got started in the music industry. Kind of like what we were just talking about with the podcast. Every episode is about the music industry and about what these guys did, who they are, why they got started, what they had to do to get started. And it was such a fun endeavor that we went through with that.
Well, it's funny because of that podcast, I met a gentleman that you interviewed, Matthew, and he gave me your information, and that's how we came together. So thank God that
Matthew
we have this.
Phillips.
Yes, thank God we have these, entities to allow us to meet people, even though, like I said, meeting people is not as available as it used to be. But I know you're a busy guy.
Honestly, I will tell you this. I got to tell you this. I honestly think right now people are getting way more connected personally than they were before COVID, because you have people who are freaking out, having to do something. They have to get out there. And the only way they can is through digital interface like this now. And so you're getting people who are forcing themselves to use their networks that they may not have used before, just to reach out to the world. And networking is the most important thing you can do in any business, in any industry, especially entertainment, is putting your word out there. And like you're helping me out by promoting my podcast. And, that's how this industry survives, is networking, supporting, and making sure everybody who wants to know has access to that information.
Well, thank you so much, brother. Man, it was so great. Let me tell
Anytime.
you this. I thought your advice was great. You're an amazing guest, buddy. And we're going to get you back on here as much as possible. You're looking good. You're feeling good. Also, as a bald brother myself, much love, my friend.
Heck yeah, man.
Let's
Keep
try to
it
get
clean.
Merry Christmas. If I don't get a chance to wish it to you, Happy New
Yes,
Year.
sir.
And let's get together soon again on this thing after the new year. Try to collaborate somehow. And I want to definitely help other people get their things going. So thanks again for taking the time, Jonathan.
Of course, man. Anytime. Happy to help out. And honored to be a guest, man.
Yes, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. Please stay safe and stay healthy. Have a good night, Jonathan.
You too, man.
Take it easy, buddy.